Hey guys, we are going to be casting a Zerg versus Protoss this time around. It's Neblime up against Hamster. This match played on the 4th of April, and it will be on Axiom. We've got Hamster in the top right, Neblime in the bottom left. I have no idea what to expect from this game, but it was a rare case where Neblime submits a single replay for me to cast, so we might be in for a banger, or we might not be. We'll find out. This is kind of early on. Obviously, it's a few weeks ahead of, or I guess 10 days ahead of when we're having Neblime play his group for battlements. So, you know, it's been some time ago, but it's still good practice. You know, Hamster likely a contender. We know that as of right now, you know, going through and recording this the day after he played in his group. Hamster did indeed make it into the throne room stage as expected and in first place, perhaps also to be expected. So Neblime, who's gunning for a first place finish for his own group, you know, getting some versus Protoss experience is always helpful, and against another player who is on top. And for a while, Hamster was figuring Neblime out, actually, but it seems like the shoe is on the other foot. We've got a version of the game, this is far back enough that the balance changes to the Zethra core, the Izira core, and the Hydralisk have not yet been implemented. So we'll get a bead on whether or not Hamster can deal with the Hydras. I'm sure we'll end up seeing that in this matchup. We do have the gateway here. Looks like maybe a second gate on the way from Hamster. He's thinking about it. Maybe he's thinking about a lattice instead. No, it will be a gateway. In fact, pops up the ramp and sees that indeed there is a hatch on the ramp. There's actually a Hydrith incoming. I don't know if that scribe went deep enough to see it. So it will be a Hydrith opener, which is... This is very rare, actually. I have not seen Neblime do that. It looks like Hamster preoccupied with the idea of denying the expansion. And Neblime's fine to feed into this idea before moving on as a scout. Because by the time this scribe gets close enough, we'll have a Legionnaire out. We'll see if Hamster wants to cancel that, or if... he's fine with it. I mean, they do okay versus Hydralisks in the early game, but once you really get that count going, it's quite high. Neblime sharking off to 9 o'clock. We got a 3-gate follow-up here from Hamster. Thinking maybe he can outproduce his opponent thanks to the wonders of, you know, the more expensive and slower to start economy. Got 2 Hydras coming out here from Neblime. This is kind of the era when... you know, you charge on in as Hamster with your first couple military units, and you'd be liable to get some worker damage, lose some mining time. And this is the kind of thing you have to do when your opponent's being super greedy. This is the greed era of Neblime, but as you can see, his Hydras are finishing up. Still 2 Legionnaires here, along with the Scribe, and that being the first unit that Neblime pays attention to. He's actually let his first Hydra slip there. I think he's probably going to be good for it. You know, he's trying to fight, you know, micro back a little bit. His own workers that he pulled for whatever purpose are actually going to be focused down now. And there we go. There's the Kagrant. They were body blocking his Hydra a little bit. We've got 3 Legionnaires. Did end up losing 1. I wouldn't think twice about charging up that ramp, particularly since you know there's a Kagrant coming. But you are forcing more action out of Neblime. He doesn't really want to be making the those kinds of units. Now, it makes sense to go for the Izira core here because it's going to reduce the shields of all of your Legionnaires, right? So Hamster going for that as his primary target, now falling away as more of them pop up. If I'm Hamster here, I look for another worker kill, and then we'll see what more we can do. Oh, look at that. He ends up getting one anyway. I think that might have been the scout worker. Sent off all the way earlier ago. It is, of course, a 3-gate follow-up, so many more consistent unit productions coming out. Should be able to get one more worker. I like that. Yeah, Hamster definitely, I would say, in the lead here and able to, you know, produce his own workers fairly steadily, although is a little bit behind, actually. He's not currently making any. We do have Zealots coming out as well. Neblime not currently building anything. Content with just the 4 Izira cores, thinking that he's just going to ward off this attack. Losing more workers. This is going to drop a second one here. And meanwhile, a Zealot charges up to start working on that Circuit. I think that was a little bit of, you know, it's good worker damage for sure. But it's also a little bit risky here for Hamster to charge up with a single Zealot. If he had 3 Zealots right now alongside all his Legionnaires, I feel like he might be able to have a significant push in. But right now, it's only Izira cores. So 5 Izira cores, I mean, you could do some pretty good damage. You will need to play around the Circuit, though. I don't think that Izira core stuff can move out. And we're still seeing steady production here. Neblime coming in with 2 Hydras. He should be able to push down the ramp, I think. But a nice recovery. Obviously has the same amount of workers as his opponent. So not in any danger there. Holding Alt will show you the expected worker count after the units that are currently being produced are on their way. And here comes the push with only melee units out of Hamster. And you can see the splash with the I0 cores really serving him well. Neblime riposting that attack with relative ease. Gets rid of a Zealot and multiple Legionnaires. Oh, I think maybe that Zealot corpse is actually a little bit on the old side. Yeah, it's already gone now, so that was an old one. All right, well, he's contained his opponent for a little bit. They'll be starting their expansions at relatively similar intervals, which is pretty good for the Protoss, in theory. But I do wonder if maybe Hamster missed an opportunity for kill pressure. You know, I was talking about his kill threat versus Newt in the previous cast over that I did on Impetus, a very long PvT, where Hamster eventually was able to get the dub, but, you know, at what point do you think about, wait, I could have maybe won a lot sooner, I could have just crushed my opponent, you know, Shambler style maybe. That little X factor there, I feel like Hamster sometimes still needs to work on that. But hey, he also, you know, you like the long games, and you see what you can do there. Gonna go ahead and warp in a couple of Wardens. Not that many Hydras over here, only 4. And plenty of melee to deal with this. So without the circuit, without the cliff advantage, I think Hamster can commit to this attack. But it looks like he wants to fall back and wait for some shields to kick back in. His Ecclesiasts are out now. Sharking around, trying to figure out what does he want to do here. There we go, isolating. We are going to see those I0 cores fall relatively easily. And the Ecclesiasts doing their job as well. With both of the Ecclesiasts still alive. The Hydras came up, but not able to get much done. That Zealot staying alive for a very long time. This is actually before the Ecclesiast got buffed with its passive range. I think that Zealot that died actually would have stayed alive had it been the increased radius now. So, just to point out, for any Protoss watching, I think Ecclesiasts are still a totally fine answer to keeping your Zealots alive more versus Hydras, which now also deal worse with Zealots as long as the shields hold. Because the shields hold, that gives you 3 armor instead of 2. Hydra only has 2 armor pen instead of 3, and right now in this very version of the game that we're watching it has 3, but it was nerfed since then. So there you go. Hamster doing his best to keep his money low. Will drop an Ardent Authority. Has had idle gateways for a little while now, since those Ecclesiasts, I think. Maybe a couple of melee units afterwards. And we have 10 Hydras with a couple more on the way. But still not great saturation here at the natural, and in fact, Neblime harvesting from the ridge before he does the geyser. So that's a little bit of a mistake. We've got this Ardent Authority now almost halfway done. Interesting option. I mean, he has the embassy. We could see an Accantor drop, but we could also see something a bit more typical of PvT, actually, if he goes for Architects. And that's not necessarily a bad shout. You know, there's 3 other units you can make in that structure as well. We'll see what Hamster has in mind. It's an interesting choice there. I think without the Accantor... Yeah, with the Envoy started, it's probably an Accantor. Very, very good for picking workers. Even against Terrans, you can one-shot their Masons. And with the embassy also predominantly being used for the purpose... We actually don't see a witness out. The embassy is just being used here for worker production and now a transport. So that's an interesting choice from Hamster as well, keeping things focused. Dropping a pylon in the natural. And I'm sure Neblime's thinking about taking a 3rd base now. I just saw him... I believe I just saw him waypoint a worker out. Yeah, so he's all good on that front. 15 Hydras and 1 I0 core. The optimal balance, of course. There's the second one. Not really sure what's coming yet. An Ovoleth for scouting, but nothing in it. Scooping up the Accantor as soon as it stops moving. Love that. I feel like maybe there were changes made to make that behavior a little bit less silly as well. But I could be wrong, you know. And waypointing through, it's actually going to miss the Ovoleth. So your vision updates a lot faster in Cosmonarchy compared to Starcraft 1. And look at this, the 3 Draconans pop out immediately. He should still see the second embassy, and of course that Ardent Authority building an Accantor. Doesn't see an Envoy critically, but you know, he can surmise that it's probably going to happen. Already adding a couple of Kagrants. We'll see if these are Spraiths or Circuits, because you can block, you know, try to block the Accantor from being dropped. But as of right now, I think Hamster can absolutely just drop this underneath this. Yep. Kills 1 worker, scoops it back up. Looking for an unload spot. Not finding it just yet. He's going to go ahead and hit that Hydra. Yeah, you can see these are going to turn into circuits for the clearing out the Accantor itself. A good attempt from Neblime to push on through. He's trying to decollide his workers so that they don't clump up like that, but the stop key not actually pushed down. My God, man. So many dead workers. Couldn't select it to see how many it killed, unfortunately, at the very end, but I want to say that's double digit. You know, killed one down here, killed the Hydra, burned some mining time, probably killed 10 at the main. Still, Hamster only narrowly ahead by 5 workers right now, and Zerg can recover from that. So losing the Accantor when it could have contributed towards the war party here, and of course no envoy to back it up, feels like maybe we're lacking a little bit there as well. I'm looking around for that second warp in. That was the third base going down for Hamster, but he's about to be attacked. I think his ground force is pretty good. The Nexus, if it gets like, I wanted to say, you know, if the army was here already, then Hamster could probably save this. As it currently stands, I fully suspect this Nexus to end up going down. The Zealots and other melee units engaging here, away from the Accantor. It's a little bit awkward. The Ecclesiasts can get jumped on. Now, admittedly, Neblime did not really focus hit down the Nexus, and he also did not really, you know, fully secure the army kill. So he did some damage, and obviously the Nexus is going to have a little bit of missing health, I think. Something got canceled over there. It looks like the gateway that was supposed to be over here got canceled, turned into a rogue gallery. We'll see what that's for. Another Accantor. I think going like... I've actually speculated this a little bit on the channel, and the Discord server, rather, pretty recently. I was talking with 3Crow about ways to counter mass Goliaths way back. And I feel like like a macro Accantor style is pretty good, honestly. Like, we've got 6 rogue galleries. This is going to be for Mass Vagrant. But if you do double Ardent Authority and you just waypointed Accantors and kept, you know, Dracodins or Zealots or whatever for a relative front line, and you just have made your opponent go dodgeball, then your Zealots do all this crazy stuff, right? And you're all good for the whole time, it feels like. So, I don't know, it's interesting. And meanwhile, Zorka's Shroud has been completed by Neblime, and he is starting Tier 2, going for a 4th base. And also a Hacharos by this ramp. Another thing that's been a hot talking point kind of recently is the idea that should we have some sort of building blocker on these ramps. I think for Axiom it doesn't matter too much, although I could see an argument for adding a little bit of solar array here, and then maybe a little bit over here as well, just so that you stop the solar array is this black tile. You can't build on it, for those who don't know. You know, maybe in a couple of spots here and there, just to make it so that at the very edge of the ramp, the very lip of the ramp, you can't build. I think that's probably fine. You know, in Cosmonarchy, our maps tend to be a lot more permissive of certain things that have been deemed unfit for competitive play by the ASL-style maps, the Starcraft 1 competitive maps. And by that, I mean we have a few more, like, drop holes and stuff, partially because we have cliff advantage, right? Like, you can probably fit a couple units here, like Eidolons or whatever. And, you know, I actually don't think it would give you that much of an advantage at the end of the day in Cosmonarchy. But if it ends up being a problem, you know, okay, well, we have the power to fix that on a tile set level, and then have our mappers, you know, place those custom tiles here and there, and then it'll be just fine. But the other thing that was coming to mind was, you know, we have a lot more buildable terrain in the middle of the map. Like, solar array, okay, sure, yeah, it's unbuildable. And there's, like, little isolated pockets. You can put, like, a watchdog or whatever. You might not even be able to do it there, actually. I can't remember if... trying to piece together what these tiles look like in the editor. And I think you can only put, like, a pylon there. So, anyway, it's a little bit weird. Maybe you can put one here for the wider pieces of terrain. But that's fine. Like, that's just the way that the tile is. And in StarCraft 1, they typically have a lot of unbuildable terrain because otherwise Terran can take over the map. But so far, it's mostly been not Terran taking over the map by putting a bunch of forward posts down. Neblime as Zerg, Hepsea as Protoss, doing a lot of that. And so we've been thinking about maybe blocking off the ramps specifically. And we try to keep the maps a little bit more on the permissive side. Now, 21 Hydras are on the other side of the map. And this will have to be a counterattack that is considered, because there's a lot of static defense. There's a Matroleth here to help with the Hydras. And I think Neblime might be able to really do some critical damage here. But the Accantors are crawling across the map. And this is what I was talking about earlier. You force your opponent to play dodgeball, and suddenly all of these Accantors are going to start fragging out. That one dealing about 1,000 damage before it died, a little bit under. And we still have 3 Accantors left to go pretty deep here. And somehow, with the reinforcements here, we're only now getting a little bit of economic damage from Neblime's side onto Hamster. I don't really think those Vilgoricors, or sorry, Vilgolets are going to be able to do too much here. And certainly you're not going to be able to do much for the Accantors, right? Instantaneously losing that. But falling back, fearing the reprisal. I don't really know if Neblime has a strong answer to that. Now, he did do a lot of economic damage at the third base. He does have a fourth base up and running. He's capped his geysers. He's doing well with that. Meanwhile, we actually have the Aquifer starting at the third and is already constructed in the main and natural. We are going to see Patriarchs come out. Great choice for keeping your units alive and very healthy. Obviously, this is still with the April Fool's celebration Quasilisks, as you can see. But besides that, I guess Quasis can maybe just like absorb the damage. We got 3 o'clock coming online here for Hamster trying to catch up in the economic game. Down 25 workers, a little bit more than that actually. Accantor is very slowly crawling back across the map. That's obviously their main weakness, is the mobility. And that's fine. That's going to be a very fast cancel. I feel like, again, a little bit faster than needed to be. Behind this, by the way, Neblime is going for the Alcag Eteth. A couple shots over the wall. You can see here getting quite a bit of damage dealt. Another attack being pinched off and heading to 12, but there is no base there. More pylons, more ancestral archives. We got a grand library coming as well. Would love a crucible over here. Would not be bad whatsoever. Matrolets sharking across. In search of targets, corpses, whatever you can name, whatever you can think of. Witness is going to go ahead and spot this army at 12. And so Hamster will be aware of what his opponent is doing. Neblime relying a lot on the Hydra right now for doing heavy lifting, and I feel like the Accantors are absolutely going to help out a lot with that. Here's an Irolith for scouting, but there's nothing in it. Not that Hamster necessarily knows that. Love the Charlatan to get multiple procs of the Patriarchs. You can see that. That's going to really help with the damage there. And the Accantor as well. Accantor Charlatan is like one of the most deadly comps in the game, but I don't know if this Charlatan is actually going to escape and link up with the rest of the force here. We've just got Accantor shots after Accantor shots, and the Patriarchs will be okay as well. That's also more splash damage. Let's see what ends up happening here. The Accantor is falling back. Ensnaring Brood for a brief moment, applying to that one in the front. I think it will end up being bopped, and Engram finishes in the background. We still have 3 Accantors live in the fight because one of them was behind the Nexus at the third the whole time. And those dodgeballs are not being dodged. All of them hitting and making great impact. This one even staying alive at the very tail end of things. Finally will end up falling. But that was a pretty big wipe of Neblime's forces, and he will have to consider what he's going to be doing next, flooding more units across the map, but I don't know that they're going to be particularly efficient versus this kind of composition. We don't have that Charlatan. It seems to have fallen by the wayside here. Instead, it's just going to be Mass Vagrant, Vagrant Patriarch, and listen, the Vagrants can keep themselves alive even when they are in their undead state. Like the Shade right here is slowly dying, but it can keep itself healthy with the shields as long as it attacks the units debuffed by the Patriarch. So, just another example of how you can basically use it as a force multiplier. Now, Hamster is going to be looking back towards 3 o'clock, which is a little bit foolhardy since there's 4 Quasis still guarding that. We've got pretty good macro coming out from him, but he still has 1,000 minerals in the bank and almost the same amount of Vespene, not producing out of his Ardent. Looks like that Irolith regressed into an Ovaleth because of the flyby. Matroleths also still continuing to move around here. 17 Zoroastroleths. That's where all of Neblime's minerals went, apparently. And yeah, we've got double Optecton at once. Still no Crucible over here. I definitely think that would be a good call. Only now going to start to eke out a living over here. Massing up another force to strike, but there's still, there is no base there yet, right? Hamster has not set his sights on that just yet. Got another set of units coming over here, transferring the workers over to that bottom right position for Neblime. He's got a pretty big army starting to mass up at his rally point. That's also starting to clog things up as well. Thinking about how many more static defense structures does he want? Taking the sort of, I guess you'd call that the 4 o'clock base. We'll call it that for sake of argument. So Neblime looking pretty good, all things considered. He needs to realize where his traffic jam is. I'm sure he'll pan over there in a moment, especially when, Hamster comes a knocking on the door. 17 Zoroastroleths, that's great and all, but you don't have much actual power. So here we go, cycling through the army. Does have some Almaxilisks. That's the only use of the Eteth he's had so far. But the Patriarchs are going to do pretty well for that as well. We do have Tier 3 starting, and he's recalled the force from the top left. So looking to surround this army, not a bad idea. Still no Charlatans here, mind you. So it's just Patriarch Vagrant and a single Zealot as well for good measure. Well, there's a couple in there, actually. One of them will fall in the front line. Need to see maybe those Accantors be brought down. We have the Optectons as well. And yeah, Hamster is just going to see what he can do to hold strong in the front. He's even going to sort of chip away a little bit. A couple of his workers, I think they're distance mining. I don't really know what's going on. Oh, no, they're returning to the treasury. That's what's happening. So obviously that will be found out. I'm sure Hamster it's not a blind thing that you would take this 3 o'clock position. Neblime is probably expecting that to be the case. But he hasn't really been able to expand for free. He had to clear the spot with the 4 quasis. There's eyes on all of the other bases that Hamster is likely to go for next. Oh, there's a bit of a burrow. I feel like that was a mistake. I'm not really sure what's going on there. Nice Psionic Storm to just, you know, apply more damage to them the longer they stay in there. It should even end up killing that Vilgalith, and indeed it will. Engram firing off a shot. There's a second one being here for the sake of warping in. Big force in the middle of the map being recalled, and Neblime has a lot of money. I don't know if he's saving it. Nope, never mind. 20 Zoriustalets. This is where, you know, there was some dispute about, like, you know, is Zerg the easiest race to macro with? And, you know, the one answer is yes, because you just select, you know, the Hatcherosk and you immediately spend your larva. But the other answer is no. If you're bad at macro, you will make mistakes. And Neblime is not bad at macro relative to the rest of the field, but you can see a weakness of his. And I have tried to shut it out a few times for those who are trying to maybe pressure him down. We saw in that very long game where he did not play his best versus the Shambler's Terran. He kept making tier 1 units. And the same is happening here right now, giving Hamster a chance in. However, there's still more to happen. Obviously, the Hydra Quasi army is not going to be too efficient over here. Looks like the Barghests are stacked up nicely to provide their armor pen passive, but I don't actually know that Neblime is fielding any units that will require that. Back at home, thinking about what to spend it on, he's going for the Axtoth. I guess he wants Excitralisk, more Tothracore, that kind of thing. I feel like there's enough on the side of Hamster to hold that back, but we'll see what kind of composition Neblime cooks up. And actually, he's getting contested over here with his Hydra Quasi-Force. Not really able to get too much done there, and now sandwiched by the incoming reinforcements. He'll pick some of the Barghests, but that's about it. I think some of the front line will go down here as well, but Hamster is looking pretty healthy. Neblime is actually biting off a little bit more than he can chew here, thinks that maybe he can make this happen, but the Patriarch count is pretty high. And the Vagrants are going to be kept very healthy by attacking the units that the Patriarchs are splashing onto. So this force will take a very long time for Neblime to clear. And in fact, I don't think the same is going to be said on the side of Hamster. He's splashing so many of the units, and Neblime not making any progress. Barely managed to touch the Vagrant count. Sure, he cleared the front line. That's definitely a thing. The Accantor is not yet moving across the map. The Uptecton stationed up here at the 3 o'clock base just for safety. Now, admittedly, Hamster only on 4 bases. Neblime is on 6. That's a very big difference. But as you can see, this force is very potent and stays alive for a very long time. Doesn't want to lose his Patriarch to the high ground Hydras, so will end up falling back there. 2 more Patriarchs joining the fight. It's really hard to, undersell, right? Like these kinds of units, or rather, you can try your best to say that, oh, they're really powerful. Does that get the job done? Does that communicate the idea? We've got some Cantavises for the longer-term Psionic Storm. Does take a little bit longer to actually do the damage, but it's just you stand in these fights for a lot longer. You stand in these spaces for a lot longer. Now here we go. The Exceptionalists are out. They have great DPS. Can they stay alive? They've got a double life of their own. Psionic Storm to frustrate any further attempts. I think some of the Patriarchs have actually gone down finally. There's one getting sniped. Here's the Mortothicores trying to charge into the battle, especially under cover of the Vilgoricores, but there was only a small number of them. Frustrated a little bit by this pathway here, not able to make the connections that they want. Hamster's missing his Uptectons. If he moved his Uptectons across, he would have a lot of value here. Transferring some workers to start harvesting resources from the middle of the map, you get to return them to that neutral treasury. I feel like that's an underutilized aspect of Axiom. Not very many people doing it, right? Like Hamster could be doing it for free, basically, over here. Although there are some units to backstab, so it's not exactly free. Neblime trying to take a little bit more ground, but again, mostly he's on the tier 1 army. The Excitralisk sort of moving in here. With enough Zoriustalets, he might be able to get rid of this. Barghest is helping out with the armor penetration. Zoriustalets are starting to fall. And indeed, most of the DPS is already gone here as well. There is an Arcagelisk out. We don't really have that much that can be dealt with that. We have Prostration Stages, we've got Argosies, and we have the Ultrav Cavern started for Neblime. But again, the force has not really changed in its complexion. Zealot, Vagrant, Patriarch, that is the bread and butter here for Hamster. And he wants to even try to see if he can hunt down the Alcagelists, but without the Barghests to provide a little bit more armor penetration, it's going to be a little bit harder for those Alcagelisks to end up going down. Hamster trying to bring the hammer down on him, but I don't know if it's going to be enough. Oh, he's not actually mining from this. Not that it matters. He's got 4K minerals in the bank right now. I suppose he could be banking more. Again, I really think if those Uptectons were there earlier, before the Alcagelisks came out, you could have actually busted this third. And then who knows what happens after that. But again, 6 bases for Neblime, getting a 7th at 9 o'clock. And of course he will frustrate the mining that just started here. 12 o'clock still not taken, so Neblime can feel pretty confident that he doesn't have to worry too much about a lot of things, right? Like if you think about it, he's not really worried about the macro that Hamster's doing because he knows he's been on more bases for a longer period of time. So that's another thing that's going to keep him pretty active in the game. Uptecton's finally moving into the middle of the map. Are those the same ones from here? Yeah, it looks like that force was indeed cycled through. No, actually, there's 2 more that are over there. So these are 2 fresh ones. Mine Tyrants were being made, but the Alcagelisks are too far away to be engaged right now. So that is going to be a little bit of an unfortunate one. I think he even attack moved his own unit there. Patriarchs can start to do a little bit of damage to Vagrants as well, trying to engage onto the Alcagelisks. But remember, all the Barghasts got sniped and they were never reinvested in a very gas-expensive unit. Gas being the limiting factor here for Hamster. He's not pounding out a lot of Amaranths, gateway units like Zealots, Legionnaires, or whatever, just to get his mineral bank down a little bit. He will be whittling through the Alcagelisks, though, and the Mine Tyrants are here as well. They can either slow and consume all the corpses to increase the attack rate of nearby units, or nearby allies, I should say, or they can just start stealing away these powerful units. And here we go. Firing off a couple of shots there, he'll take the Alcagelisk. It will be stunned, but, you know, at the very least, he's close enough to grab it now. Oh, look at this, though. The Mine Tyrants being very, very aggressive there. Ignoring the Ultra Cores, too. Like, that was a really good option there. And it looks like Hamster, it feels a little bit premature, but he just doesn't have it. He does not have the composition to deal with that. Felt pressured to deal with what Neblime had. I still think there was play from that position, but he never expanded at 12 o'clock. He never denied any of the bases that Neblime was taking. Maybe he was just skipping the rest of it for us, getting rid of the carnage before it could really hit. Neblime will take the dub. And we'd like to see some tier 3 action, so hats off to Neblime for winning and, of course, for submitting. And Hamster has some notes to take, some things to work on. I would say the same, actually, about Neblime, but I'm sure you guys are excited to see what happens as the competitive scene continues to evolve. Up next, I think we'll take a look at some newcomers. GG's.